At first glance, the inaugural player auction of the Women's 100 looked like any other franchise auction. Big names, quick bids, and a lot of numbers flashing across the screen. With over £4 million being spent, the event marked yet another milestone for women's cricket. But auctions are just about who bought who. We'll save that conversation for when the season is close by. Availability, form, injuries, cricket has way too many variables to even understand how a squad is looking like 4 months ahead of the season. Instead, I'll be shedding light on some of the hidden patterns we got to see at the Piccadilly Lights, and if it is an indication of some growing trends or just a standalone phenomena. Age is just a number. Well, 5 of the top 10 most expensive players were over 30, and only one teenager in Tilly Coleman made over £100,000. In fact, the average age of the 10 most expensive players stands at 29 currently. With a lot of foreign investment entering the league, we can see why teams seemed far more comfortable paying the big bucks to experienced pros rather than unproven talent. The need for immediate success is far more important to the new owners over creating some long-term pipelines. And not that one is wrong and the other is right. The biggest eye-opener though was that pace bowling all-rounders seem to be a lot more in demand than any other player type. We've seen this play out in men's cricket for a fairly long time, and it does make sense there because of the lack of quality resources with that skill set. That isn't exactly the case in women's cricket. But it surely didn't deter teams from going after pace bowling all-rounders like a Black Friday sale. 4 of the top 5 most expensive players in Sophie Devine, Danny Gibson, Nadine de Klerk and Izzy Wong were all pace bowling all-rounders. And if you take a slightly broader lens, the 4 hours of buying saw the A teams cumulatively spend nearly 30% of their budget on this player type. In fact, Welsh Fire took this liking to a whole new level, having spent over 60% of their remaining budget on just pace bowling all-rounders. To be clear, I'm only going by the classification that the players went ahead with while registering themselves. Considering how some of them would try to game the system by choosing certain player types to get favourable entry points, do take it with a pinch of salt. For instance, Sri Charni did register herself as an all-rounder. In a format that's been geared towards batters, it was kinda poetic to see them be the least sought after player type with only 12% of the remaining budget being spent towards them. Of course, it goes without saying that market signals like these only incentivize more batters to pick up a secondary skill in bowling or keeping. Speaking of keeping, wicket keepers got nearly 1/5 of the total budget. Not too bad at all, considering how a team can make do with just the one keeper at a time. And here's where the zero-sum nature of an auction came to the fore, as Trent Rocket spent over 30% of their budget on 3 quality keepers in Bess Heath, Beth Mooney and Sarah Bryce. Well, a talent more in mine means a talent less in yours. And when it came to bidding patterns, it was interesting to see how certain teams went about their business compared to others. A general rule of thumb is that if a team is the losing bidder for a player, that player was a part of their plans. And every time they miss out on someone, they need to revert to plan B to get the balance of their choice. Going by this logic, Birmingham Phoenix was the most efficient team with an efficiency of 80% at the auction, having been the losing bidder for only 3 players, the lowest for any side. Fair to say, they got a squad primarily of their choice. Whether the choices were good or not is a conversation for another day. With the auction expertise that a lot of IPL team owners and think tanks carried with them, it was no surprise that 3 of the top 4 most efficient teams were groups with a DC, MI or an RCB connection. What was particularly surprising though was Sunrisers' lead strategy, or arguably the lack of one, at the auction. They bid for 26 players, the highest by some distance, and secured only 11 of them, the joint second lowest. Was it a case of them playing 6D chess and spoiling others' plans, or were they just plain confused? Only time will tell. That familiarity breeds contempt is probably not something cricket believes in, with several coaches going back to their preferred players of choice. The upcoming season will see the reuniting of Malu Nadine de Klerk, Divine Klinger, DC Lizelle and Kitely Nicola Carey to name a few. I divided the 130 names that were called, and this includes a few that were brought back after going unsold in the first round, into 2 groups of 50 and 63 each. I came up with this division because the lunch break happened right after the 50th name was called, so it gives us a good idea of what plans teams came up with for both sessions. Understandably, teams spent nearly 2/3 of their auction budget on the first set of 50 players, which included most of the marquee international and domestic players. This is very much in line with how the 2 WPL auctions also function. The one outlier was Trent Rockets, who seemed fairly quiet for the most part before waking up and spending nearly half of their auction budget in the post-lunch session. The amount of money that was left unspent at the end of it all was particularly disappointing. Birmingham Phoenix, Manchester Supergiants and Welsh Fire did not spend over £60,000 after the auction was completed. Even if you account for the two wildcard signings at £15,000 apiece, that's an additional £30,000 that they could have spent to make their squads better. While the big money spent seems to be catching the headlines, let's also not forget the fact that such figures are exceptions to the norm. It was great to see 10 players secure contracts worth £100,000 or more. The truth is also that over 70% of the players will be paid less than £50,000. This is not a complaint, just a showcasing of what it's like for the majority of the players. The median salary for a player this season stands at £27,500. Over 80% higher than what Tier 1 players were paid in the inaugural season. A healthy sign of the growth the sport has seen in the last few years. Of course, we didn't speak much about the players individually. I will still talk about what I personally thought was some of the best buys and surprises of the auction. Let's start off with the best buys. Number 1 has to be the first ever player to be bought at the 100 auction, Davina Perrin. At £50,000, and in hindsight knowing what some of the other players went for, I think that was as good a deal as any for Birmingham Phoenix. With Davina Perrin, Tammy Beaumont, Elise Perry, Alice Capsey, I think that's a top 4 that would be as formidable as any. Next up, Bryony Smith. An aggressive right-handed opening batter who did fairly decently for Trent Rockets last year. I was really excited to see how she goes about the auction this time around. It was very surprising to see that no one else really fought with Sunrisers Leeds who placed the opening bid for her. Having gone for £27,500, I think that is the steal of the auction. And with the way they've got Belsey and Deepthi lower down, they really needed someone like a Bryony Smith at the top to help mitigate the stagnation that they could potentially face in the middle overs. Number 3, Catherine Bryce. A typical utility all-rounder who can contribute with both the bat and ball. She is a name I'm really excited to watch, and the fact that she will now be playing with the likes of Meg Lanning and Smriti Mandana, I really hope this does her WPL chances a world of good. A fantastic new ball bowler, a more than handy number 3, number 4 batter who can strike at about 110, 120. I think watch out for her this time. The biggest surprises though, of course, there were quite a few, and to be honest, it was actually a bit hard trying to prune the list down to just 5, but Danny Gibson at £190,000. My word was I surprised seeing that bidding. Not that it is a reflection of the player, I don't rate her much, but £190,000 means you have to be a proven commodity. You have to be someone who will win your side at least 3 to 4 games of the 14 that you're expected to play. And for someone who's not really been on the field much, who's had to face her fair share of injuries. In fact, last season she wasn't even bowling because of her back stress fracture, and with the bat in hand she really had extremely meagre returns. So it was very interesting to see someone like the Sunrisers Leeds go after her the way they did, especially because they already had a proper pace bowling all-rounder in Annabelle Sutherland, but of course, you know, they did rate the talent very highly and they were very keen on having her. Number 2 is yet another Sunrisers Leeds pick, and it is Deepthi Sharma. A base price pick, so which meant a lot of people were just understandably saying that, you know what, at 27,500, probably Deepthi Sharma is the steal of the auction. You know, she's definitely a very capable all-rounder. She's won the trophy with London Spirit. Again, you'll also have to look at recent form. You'll have to look at how she's been in the last few months. Her batting sort of, you know, been on the down low. Her bowling's not been that great. Her fitness has been a bit of an issue. We saw in the recently concluded India-Australia series as well, she wasn't really looking her best. So, of course, you've got time. There's still 4 months remaining for the season, but it did seem like, you know, there were better options available for Sunrisers Leeds to look at. Number 3, Richa Ghosh. £50,000 for a gun finisher who's already proven herself at the biggest stage, which is the ODI World Cup, and who can also, of course, keep more than effectively. I did think that Richa Ghosh would get a lot more bids than she did, but I don't think Manchester Supergiants would be complaining. And of course, one cannot deny the Smriti Mandana connect there if she had something to do with this signing. So let's see how that goes. Number 4 has to be Heather Graham, a medium pace bowling all-rounder who was with the Trent Rockets last year. Someone whose batting was known to be very explosive in the past, but in the last couple of years I don't think we've seen a lot of that. And that's why there were so many other pace bowling all-rounders available that they could have looked at. Even someone like a Dirksen who eventually went to the Birmingham Phoenix at base price, they could have considered her. Fatima Sana, a name that I really was looking forward to, a name I was really hoping that someone goes after. In all fairness, I'll have to even say now, Fatima Sana would have been a much better choice there. I know, you know, they're kind of different types. Heather Graham is more of that nibbly, military medium pace bowler. Fatima Sana can be a lot more expressed, but she can bowl well with a new ball, and her batting has been hitting new highs in the recent past. In fact, some of her recent matches, the ones especially against South Africa, where everyone saw what she did, in a couple of games where she single-handedly brought Pakistan to parity. It was really unfortunate to see her not even being called in, let alone get a bit. But, fingers crossed she will get her due very soon. Lastly, of course, Georgia Adams and Ollie Armitage. I couldn't believe that the two captains who led their sides to the final last season were staring at the brink of going unsold at a point in time. Georgia Adams went unsold twice before being brought back a third time and eventually going to the Trent Rockets. And Ollie Armitage did not see any bids come for her when she was brought in the first time, eventually going to My London, who made a late bid for her. So yeah, those were some of the best buys and biggest surprises for me at the auction. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, this auction wasn't random. It showed us three very clear things. Teams are willing to pay a premium for flexibility, which explains the demand for all-rounders both in pre-auction signings and auction recruitment. They're prioritizing scarce skills, especially roles that directly influence the game's key phases. And just as importantly, they're building squads based on different ideas of how this format should be played. This means the real story of this auction won't be decided today. It'll play out when the tournament actually begins. Because auctions reveal strategy, but the season reveals which strategy was right. If you enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel for quality analysis on women's cricket.